This is The Extra Point, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast, sponsored by your Phoenix Suns.
Hey everyone, Julia Lopez here inside the Extra Point podcast. We had to jump on here because of the news that came down within the Arizona Diamondbacks organization. Ace Corbin Burnes is done for the year, getting Tommy John surgery, something that was expected after he left the game on Sunday, but they made it official. He is done for the entire year with TJ, and this is the first time he's experienced this type of surgery before, any type of injury at this magnitude. And joining us now is Arizona Sports Diamondbacks beat writer Alex Weiner. And Alex, just what was your immediate reaction when you heard this news?
Not totally surprised by it, but obviously this was, not what a lot of fans wanted to hear. You want the hope that somebody's going to try to fight their way back. And, it just got to a point where he clearly found out they could try to take a conservative approach where you try to rehab and rest and recover and hope that you can kind of get through the rest of the season. But that obviously leaves the risk of, hurting it more later, and then you'd have to miss more time. So they opt to get it done now. He's going to have the surgery next week. And they're going to have to see him next season. So it's a huge blow. They spent a lot of money to bring him here. He's, one of the most accomplished pitchers in the league and was on quite a run for them recently. So it's going to put some pressure on the rest of the rotation to kind of fill in the shoes. Yeah,
you mentioned it. It is such a brutal time to have him go down. He was phenomenal in the month of May, 1.67 ERA, and he had that 16 scoreless innings going. It was just so good just to see him eventually, get back into the Cy Young type pitcher that we've seen in the past. So what do you think, how do you think this pitching staff, is able to, go about this and move forward from this?
Yeah, they're going to, kind of coming into the offseason, you can kind of look at their rotation and it basically looks like how it looks now, right? With Gallen and Kelly on top, and you have Brandon Pfaadt, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Ryan Nelson. And I think there's some reasons to be optimistic about that group of five, even before the Burnes injury. So they have guys who are capable of it. But you look at it now, and Gallen hasn't quite had the season that most expected him to have at this point, although he's coming off of a really good start in Atlanta. Erod is just now coming off of the injured list after he had a rough few starts before going down. Kelly's been, as consistent as ever, and they've gotten some really good stuff out of Ryan Nelson. So, it's going to put more of the onus on, Zach Gallen's going to have to go out there and be that top line guy that they need him to be. And Merrill Kelly continued to do his thing. They made a World Series with those two as a 1-2 before, and they're going to need some quality and some depth from those two going forward.
So now all eyes are going to be on Zach Gallen. He has been struggling a little bit this season, and then he had a really good outing at Atlanta. Do you think he's kind of turning the corner here?
Yeah, we'll see. For him, it's really just stacking these kind of starts, right? Because he's had a few good ones earlier in the year at Yankee Stadium. He was amazing, had some really good starts against the Mets. But it's just about the consistency and the strike throwing too. It's because, on Tuesday in Atlanta, I think he only walked one batter. That's been kind of a struggle for him as the walk rate's been higher, and he's kind of putting himself in tougher spots, not attacking the zone as much. So if he can continue to replicate how he looked in Atlanta, just in how he's attacking hitters, pounding the zone with the fastball, getting swing and miss with the curveball, and just kind of being the guy that we've seen him be for large stretches of the last, 6-7 years or however long he's been on the team at this point, that's going to be huge for him.
And I know Ryan Nelson has been, is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be in the bullpen? With Corbin Burnes going down, do you think that automatically pushes him into a starting spot?
Yeah, he's going to start on Saturday's game against the Reds, and I think going forward, that's what his role is going to be. It's tough to kind of go back and forth. They try to keep him as stretched out as they could for the first month of the season until he had to go in there. He made a spot start for Burnes, then he filled in for Erod, and he's looked really good as a starter. He hasn't been able to go kind of as deep as the other starters just because he's still kind of building out a little bit. So it's going to be interesting how they manage that, if he is eventually going to get to the point where he can throw 100 pitches and what that recovery looks like, because it's kind of a weird tightrope to walk when you're doing that. But yeah, it seems like that's the logical solution is now your five is, the five who are currently in there, and you roll with Nelson because he's looked so good for most of this season and through, the back half of last season as well.
And I want to go back to Corbin Burnes. You guys had Tory Lovullo on your show with Burnes and Gambo. And what did you think of that? Just Tory hopping on with you guys, and just what was your reaction, gut reaction? Do you think that he's confident moving forward?
Yeah, I think he has a lot of trust in that clubhouse and a lot of trust in his players. And, like I mentioned, it's five guys who he's seen have success before. So I think that there's, reason for him to be, at least optimistic that these guys can hold it down. They obviously need the better, results out of a lot of the guys who are in that rotation than they've gotten for most of the season. But yeah, it seems like it's a gut punch. It's certainly tough. I think he felt better after talking to Burnes and kind of going over what the game plan was going to be in terms of timeline and recovery time and all that kind of stuff with Tommy John. It can kind of vary, but it's very clearly going to go into next season, not just at the start of next season, which is going to be, kind of a tricky thing to have to handle down the line.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think there's still going to be some trust in there. We saw the Diamondbacks after they lost Corbin Burnes, win 4 games in a row and kind of rally. So now it's going to be another test for them to be able to overcome a significant injury and try to push past it.
Yeah, and then with Corbin Burnes getting that, second opinion, I thought that was the, big information that we needed, that it was not going to go well. Is that what you got from the reports as well?
Maybe. I think guys are usually going to do that. If there's especially a question with their elbow. We saw AJ Puck not only get a second opinion, but like a third opinion and a fourth opinion earlier this year. And he avoided surgery and is working his way back. And the hope is that he'll be back in the bullpen at some point at the end of this month or early next month. So it can kind of go either way. But yeah, when guys get second opinions, they saw something that they're going to have to evaluate, what to do with themselves, and the team's going to have to evaluate it. So yeah, it was a sign that maybe not the best news is to come, but I didn't think that was sort of the nail in the coffin, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I know you're in the clubhouse every day. We get to go in there, every once in a while, but you're in there every day. Just tell us about what do you think of Corbin Burnes as a person, as an athlete, how he treats the media, all of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, he's, very like aligned in what he wants to do, what he wants to accomplish. I mean, his, the routine that has been covered so extensively throughout, his seasons back in Milwaukee that he developed, kind of earlier in his tenure there, and has really, really worked. He's super meticulous about that. He really hasn't had any injuries at all, of late. The last time he went on the injured list with an injury was in 2020 when he had an oblique issue. And since then, he's been pretty much healthy the entire time. So, and you can tell just listening to him talk and talking to him that it's very deliberate what he feels, what he wants to feel. He's very kind of in tune with his body. And so when something was wrong very clearly, and we saw the reaction, from the TV cameras that caught it, that certainly wasn't a good sign for him. But yeah, no, he's kind of, very seems like comfortable with and kind of understanding of what he's trying to accomplish and get done. So this is going to be a totally different challenge for him to go through this and rehab and try to get back to the level where he was. But, if anybody kind of has the mindset to attack each day and do it, he seems like a pretty good candidate.
Yeah, something that really, struck me was when he did get pulled on Sunday. You and I were both actually in the clubhouse. We were able to talk to Corbin after that injury, and he was just very low key, he understood what was happening, and he spoke freely about what was going on. And I thought that was very, very mature of him to come out and just face the media and face the music a little bit. What'd you think?
Yeah, his son was in his locker, set him up with the iPad first, and, was relaxed and didn't look freaked out or anything like that. He was just very much like, there's nothing I can do about it. We'll see what the test results are, and that's it. And that's kind of what you'd expect out of him, just based on kind of the early impressions we've gotten. But yeah, no, it didn't, come off as, oh, this guy's alarmed or this guy's scared or whatever. And, it is what it is. And now he's going to have to go through this and find a way to get back and, be better than ever next year.
Yeah, and recovery time obviously is different for every athlete, but should we expect a minimum of 12 months, just a complete year not being able to play?
I would think so. There are instances where it happens sooner, but with Tommy John, it can really vary from, 11 months to 18 months or even longer potentially. And so I would imagine next summer at some point, whether that's next July or next August or at some point then, but I don't want to, be too specific and expect something. And it's really going to deter, if everything goes to plan along the way, then maybe 12 months. But I don't know. It really can depend on how the recovery process goes.
Do you think the D-backs will be bringing in another arm in the starting rotation?
It's a tough question, right? Because they're 500 right now and they just lost their ace. If they can weather this and continue to prove that they can compete in a tough national league with a rotation that, as we talked about earlier, has some guys who are capable, but doesn't have, the head of the snake, then, maybe if they see a need for it or somebody else goes down or something like that, and they want to continue to push in, then yeah. On the other hand, if, it goes sideways and guys aren't performing and they lose a handful of games and they get to a point where it looks like they might go the other way, then they have a few guys who they could potentially offer up to other teams and be, pretty, well sought after potential trade targets. So it could really go either way. I'm not entirely sure. But I think, best case scenario, the 5 guys that they have now perform, and maybe you don't see it as this pressing need to go out and get another starting pitcher because your rotation is keeping you in these games, and you can remain competitive going deep into the summer and into September.
And we got to talk about another player that signed a huge contract. Eduardo Rodriguez is coming back from the injured list. He's starting actually on Friday night tonight against the Reds. What do you expect from him? And do you think that he can turn things around because he's kind of, below average of what everybody expected?
Yeah, it's been a weird tenure, right? Because last year, he didn't even make his Diamondbacks debut until August. We had the shoulder issue where it's like, doesn't seem like it's a huge deal. And then it had some setbacks, and then there was a huge deal, and he ended up missing a lot of time. This year, I thought he looked okay to start the season. Like he had, a handful of games with a lot of strikeouts. His defense was pretty poor behind him, and I think the numbers were a little bit worse than how he was pitching. That was not the case over his last 3 or 4 outings before he went on the injured list. So I'm not entirely sure how much of that to attribute to whatever was going on in his shoulder. Perhaps having a few weeks off and getting healthier and getting that soreness out can allow him to sort of reset and kind of get back to what he was doing earlier in the season. And, a guy can go out and give you 6 innings, give up 2 or 3 runs, but keep you in games. I think if you're looking for a sense of consistency from him, he's done this for a long time. He's a veteran starter who's been in this league and found ways to get outs for a really long time. So that's kind of what you're looking at with him, is just if the command is right, if he's able to locate all of his pitches and keep hitters off balance and kind of get deeper into games and just give you a chance every game that he's out there, that's what you want to see from Eduardo Rodriguez.
All right. And can you give the listeners any just piece of, maybe a hint of, positivity going into this next stretch without Corbin Burnes in the starting rotation?
Look back on 23, right? The Diamondbacks made the World Series with Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly atop the rotation and really no stability at all behind them. Brandon Pfaadt eventually emerged as that guy late in the season and into the postseason, but for much of that year, it was really a struggle to find, starters who can give them quality. And then the team they lost to in the World Series, the Texas Rangers, they won a World Series after their, superstar free agent signing pitcher Jacob deGrom went down with Tommy John. And so you can kind of look at that season and be like, okay, it's possible. But you're going to have a lot of other elements of your team, like the rest of the starting rotation. The Diamondbacks bullpen is going to have to be better. The defense is going to have to be better, and the offense is going to have to keep it up. But it's not, the end of the season on June 6th. They're going to still have opportunities to go out and show that they can compete. And that starts with this series over the weekend in Cincinnati.
Are we going to see Dre Jamison back up in the bigs, do you think?
I would imagine at some point. He's still on the injured list in the minors. He had an elbow thing that was unrelated to the surgery that he had. So I don't think he's quite back yet, but I would imagine at some point later in the season we'll get another opportunity with him.
He looked phenomenal in spring training, and you could just tell he was, on a different level of proving people wrong, which I love. I love those types of players, so...
Yeah, we'll see. He's got electric stuff. So if he can kind of come back and figure some things out, he could potentially be a weapon for that bullpen, but he's got some boxes to check off first.
All right, Alex. So the Diamondbacks coming off of a 3-game sweep over the Braves. They head to Cincinnati for 3. We're going to see how they do over there and see how they come together with this crazy news that nobody wants to talk about. But Alex, thanks so much for joining us on the Extra Point Podcast.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
This is The Extra Point, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast, sponsored by your Phoenix Suns.